Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now yesterday we tested GTA 5 enhanced with an RTX 4060, what is currently one of the most popular graphics cards according to the Steam hardware survey. Today we're actually testing the minimum spec GTX 1630. Now this is a 4GB card, of course we won't be able to take advantage of the added ray tracing features. So let's get into the game, see how it looks, see how it runs, and test whether or not this minimum spec GPU is accurate. Now of course we aren't using the minimum spec CPU, I've actually got a i5-12400F in the PC. I think this is a pretty affordable CPU these days, comes in at less than £100, on the used market it's even cheaper. So I thought we'd start with the minimum settings with the GTX 1630 using just under 3 gigs of video memory. Of course we have a budget of 4GB. Everything is basically set to its respective lowest here, including the RT options, which we can't actually enable. We do not have the ability to do so with a card like this. So if you want to play it on the GTX 1630, the minimum spec card, you're going to get plus 60 frames per second with these settings. Now, when I read minimum spec, I always think 30 FPS. I think if a game can hit more than 30 FPS with a minimum spec system or GPU, then the developers have been, fairly accurate with their assessment. And here, well, it's even better. Sometimes we're hitting at least 100 frames per second with these visual options. Now, despite not having any of the fancy bells and whistles enabled, none of them, in fact, I do still think this looks slightly different to the Legacy Edition colour palette wise. A lot of you said it was due to the RTGI yesterday, but I think they have definitely tweaked things in terms of the colour palette. This area in particular looks different. I'm sure there are visual additions. Again, I'm looking forward to the Digital Foundry analysis to see what's really going on behind the scenes here. But the minimum settings, absolutely fine on a 1630. It's basically the limiting factor, which is what we want to see. You could certainly get away with a weaker CPU. I haven't noticed that many frame dips or drops like I did yesterday with these options, but let's turn things up a bit to the settings that I would suggest using, or my sort of recommended settings for 60 plus FPS. So we're going to be combining a game that looks good with one that performs pretty well. Now I told you a bit of a lie, not on purpose, yesterday. I said that adjusting the settings meant that we didn't actually have to restart the game, but it just turns out that the settings I changed didn't require a restart. If we do make some significant changes to certain options, then we will have to restart the game, just like we've always had to do, can't get my words out tonight, with the Legacy Edition. So for example here, we can choose between the minimum high or very high presets. We can't actually choose any of the RT options as I've stated, but we're going to ignore that. I've gone for settings that I'd actually suggest. As I'm adjusting things here, I'm sort of just thinking that these are going to be good enough for 60 frames per second based on years of PC gaming. I don't want to say my expertise, that would be very inaccurate, but I'm hoping or assuming that these options are going to be enough for just about 60 frames per second based on my experience with this game so far, but it'll be interesting to see how accurate I actually am. So here we are, we've restarted the game. We'll jump back into the options just to confirm what we've gone with. As you can see, we're basically maxing out our VRAM budget, 4.4 gigs. I had to turn off the limitation here. I've left FXAA on. As some of you pointed out yesterday, TAA does not look good. It's pretty blurry even with the sharpness turned up to high. We'll enable FSR in a little bit, but I think it's best to stick with FXAA if you want that native res, and FSR3 with the native res option enabled if your hardware will allow for it, because that's a pretty demanding option, as is TAA actually. It'll actually knock our frames down by about 5, 6 or 7, sometimes more, depending on the area. But as it is with my recommended or adjusted settings, whatever you want to call them, with FXAA, well, looks like I wasn't too far off. I think that was a pretty good estimation. 60 plus frames per second here. Now, despite the in-game menu telling us that we are utilizing more than 4GB of memory, that doesn't seem to be the case. We're seeing between 60 and 80 FPS a lot of the time. As always, the exact averages will be up on screen. Now, what I will say is that without the added RT options, any changes visually are going to be a lot less noticeable. We don't get certain reflections in the car paintwork that I've seen in other videos as well, so just bear that in mind before downloading this enhanced version. It will be a separate download to the Legacy Edition, and at the end of this video we'll actually have a comparison between this and the Legacy Edition, or the original edition, to see how performance differs. I'll be running everything at the minimum settings on both, so that we're not enabling any options that weren't there previously, etc., and we'll be seeing how the two compare. But here, with my suggested settings and FXAA, I think this is a pretty good shout. Plus 60 FPS on the minimum spec card, I don't think that's too bad at all. And I'm assuming that the RX 6400 is also therefore going to run it probably a little better. Whoops, oh sorry. Okay, on that note, let's enable FSR. We won't use native, but we'll use the quality mode, which I still think looks better than FXAA. FSR3 with the quality mode enabled and the sharpening turned right up looks better than FXAA. It certainly eliminates a lot of those jagged edges for starters, and in my opinion anyway, that's what I'd use, but we'll switch to that right now. Okay, so here we are, same settings, my adjusted settings, whatever you want to call them. Instead of FXAA, we're going to enable the frame scaling option and set it to FSR3 quality with the sharpness set to max, because if we lower this anymore, it can look a little blurry, just like TAA. Not as bad as TAA, mind you, but here we are then, FSR3 quality. As I was saying, I think this looks better than a native with FXAA, because it just totally eliminates some of the jagged edges, especially ones that are noticeable around trees, buildings, vehicles, stuff like that. It's entirely up to you as to how you play. That is the beauty of PC gaming. So here we are causing some absolute carnage downtown. We're still seeing plus 60 frames per second. I think the frame rate here with FSR3 quality is about the same as it was with FXAA. Perhaps there are a few more dips and drops. Whoops, there goes my door. It's hard to believe actually how many times we've seen this come to new generations of hardware. What we had, the PS3, 360, PS4, PS5 as well, then the PC, and then the PC Enhanced Edition. So yeah, it's certainly a long-lived title and still very popular according to Steam. How did I fail that? If anything, that was an incredible stunt jump. Look at the landing. Absolutely spot on. Cannot complain at that. But I guess it wasn't good enough for the game. Whoops. Oh, surprised I didn't get wasted there. It doesn't seem like I'm supposed to be here. This feels really liminal. This is weird. Let's get back to civilization. But yeah, FSR3 quality or FXAA, it's up to you with these settings. I find work quite well with the 1630, the minimum spec card. This area as well, also pretty good looking. Still, in fact, especially with the water quality turned up to high here. Let's just, sorry, I have selected you as the unlucky victim of my explosive potato. There you are. Right, what we'll do now, you've seen that it runs with plus 60 FPS with pretty decent settings. We'll turn everything way up to the maximum and see how it handles it. So here we are in the menu. Okay, the game wants to use over 5 gigs of video memory. We do not have that much, but I'm expecting bad things. We'll turn FSR off for now. We'll keep FXAA on. As you can see, everything is just turned way up to the highest, apart from motion blur and depth of field, because those are two options that I just personally do not like. Frame scaling is also, yeah, we'll just confirm that's off. Okay, right, GTA 5 Enhanced with the maximum settings. I can't imagine the original or legacy version of the game would actually run well on this card either, but we're seeing dips below 30 FPS. Of course, no ray tracing here either, because we simply cannot enable it. We'll go back into the options, mess about with the FSR. I think we're going to need balanced. Will that do? I think we're probably going to have to drop it even lower than balanced, to be honest. I don't think that's going to be enough. Alright, yeah, so we're still seeing less than 30 FPS. It does look good though. FSR3 with the 1630 still looks pretty decent, but unfortunately we're going to need performance mode here, so we'll just change that now. We can't go any lower than this. It's performance at the minimum and quality at the maximum. But yeah, even so, FSR3 performance doesn't look too bad, and we're seeing 30 FPS now at least. But let's get in the car, drive about for a bit, see if we can maintain a plus 30 FPS average. I wouldn't recommend playing like this. Of course, there are settings in between the ones I chose and maximum. You don't have to completely max it out, but you can do so on the minimum spec card, it seems, and hit more than 30 frames per second. The frame times are a bit all over the place, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it long term. And I think if you're playing online as well, yeah, you're going to see even more dips and drops. I haven't tested online yet. I'll probably do that for a separate video with a range of GPUs, depending on the time I have this week, really. What we'll do now then is just run a quick comparison between the Legacy, the old or the original version, and this new enhanced edition, both with the minimum settings, so that you can get an idea of how performance changes. So the enhanced edition seems to have a hard cap of 120 frames per second, which I can't turn off. I saw a few other videos basically confirming this. Now we're not going to hit that with the 1630 at minimum. We're going to be getting around 90 to 100. I think our average is probably going to come in at this test anyway, after this test, at about 100 FPS, but all figures will be up on screen. The original version of the game's capped at something like 187, I want to say, but if you get close to that, you do start to see frame dips and drops quite severely, in fact. So let's have a quick switch. And yeah, here we are, the Legacy Edition. You're going to pick up on those few dips and drops. It's going to absolutely decimate the percentile numbers. But what I might do is throw up the figures from a separate benchmark test, just me driving along the same strip of road, so you can get an idea of more accurate figures without the huge frame dips and drops. A slightly more demanding area, but here we go. Yeah, we're going to be encroaching on that 180 some odd FPS cap, and as you can see, that is something that was not happening with the new version of the game. But it is still nice to know that with the minimum spec card you can play this newly enhanced edition, albeit without any ray tracing features, and that makes me wonder, maybe it's just worth sticking with Legacy, especially if you want a higher frame rate on a higher refresh rate monitor. But thank you for watching. I hope you have found this helpful. Leave your thoughts down below as always, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.